Last week, I did a video on Epsom salts, a miracle working white powder in the garden. Actually, it's a video debunking all the myths associated with it. In this video, I'm going to share 4 other white powders that actually do a good job in the garden. And you're not going to believe the last one. It truly is a miracle. Let's jump into the first one, gypsum. It's made up of calcium sulfate dihydrate. It's a natural occurring organic mineral. It contains high levels of sulfur and calcium. Now, they also use gypsum to make drywall and plaster, which doesn't seem like it'd be a great thing in the garden, but it is. The most common use for gypsum is breaking up compacted clay soil. It makes them more porous and more able to hold moisture, but be a little bit more free draining. The addition of gypsum to clay soil can actually improve drainage and air circulation, which can aid in root development and nutrient absorption. Gypsum actually changes the soil structure in a process called flocculation. Clay particles are almost microscopically tiny, so they bond together very well. And if you have clay soil and you've gone out after a rain and then it dries, you pretty much have pottery. But gypsum actually makes those small particles join together in clumps, kind of the size of sand, so it makes it less likely to stick together. Gypsum also helps remove salt from the soil. So if you live by the beach, gypsum can really do a lot of good in your garden. Or if you're like me, a couple of years ago, I got a whole load of mushroom compost delivered that was full of salt. And I didn't know that until all my seedlings started withering away. I added a generous covering of gypsum to the top of the soil. I watered it in with plenty of water, and it worked wonders. I was actually replanting that area within a week or two, and everything did great. It also prevents crusting of the soil. So if you have heavy clay and it rains and then it dries out and cracks and gets that hard crust on it, gypsum is going to help with that. At the same time adding gypsum to clay soil, it's a good idea to add compost, any kind of organic material. A few things to keep in mind: gypsum does not change the pH of your soil, so you can use it around plants that have a set pH requirement. It's also not a substitute for other fertilizers. It's mainly calcium and sulfur. It doesn't have much nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium to speak of. The next white powder that works well in your garden is bone meal. Now, bone meal is pretty much what it says. It's steamed animal bones, usually cow, that have been ground down into a powder. Bone meal is a terrific source of phosphorus, which is the P in the NPK on your fertilizer. It's slow to break down, so you really only need to apply it once per year. Phosphorus and bone meal play a big part in photosynthesis, in root and bloom and seed production. Of course, it promotes flowering and it increases disease resistance. You want to sprinkle bone meal evenly around the base of your plants. For new plants, mix it into the soil at planting time. Use about a tablespoon for small plants and up to a cup for larger shrubs or trees. And you want to really get it into the soil, so you want to mix it down a few inches if you can. In many soils, phosphorus doesn't move freely through the soil like many other nutrients. So however you can get it down to the root level, you need to try to do that. And then after applying, you want to water thoroughly. This helps the nutrients start to break down and become available to the plants. Bone meal is especially great for bulbs. So anytime you're planting bulbs, you can put some bone meal in the bottom of the hole, then put your bulb on top of that, and it's going to really improve the flower production. It's also great for perennials. You can add it the same way, sprinkle it around the base, work it into the top few inches of the soil. A couple things to keep in mind with bone meal. Too much of it can disrupt the balance of nutrients in the soil, so always go with the fertilizer packet directions. And if you have pets or wild animals around, just know that it is a possibility that the smell of the bone meal will attract them, and they might do a little digging in the area. Another use for bone meal that's a little less common is an activator for your compost bin. You can sprinkle it throughout the compost. It's going to help it break down faster, and it's going to add vital nutrients and minerals to the finished compost. The third white powder for the garden is diatomaceous earth, or DE. It's a powder made from the fossilized remains of tiny aquatic organisms called diatoms. These tiny microscopic particles leave behind shells rich in silica, creating a fine powdery substance that's safe for humans, but deadly for pests. It's a natural insecticide. If you look at these diatoms under a microscope, the shards of them, they're sharp like razors. And they cut through the exoskeletons of insects like ants, aphids, and slugs, causing them to dehydrate and die. Plus, it's completely non-toxic for humans and pests, which makes it a great thing for organic gardening. Using diatomaceous earth in your garden is simple. Look for signs of the pest activity in the garden. Usually you're going to see like ants around the beds. We use it during rainstorms right around our front door. Just a line of it is a barrier they won't cross. So you can use the same idea to keep them out of your raised beds. You can also sprinkle it on your plants for aphids, for earwigs. You can use a dust applicator for a little bit more even coverage. The only caveat to diatomaceous earth is it needs to be reapplied after each rainstorm, or if you're watering heavily in the area. It loses its effectiveness when wet. However, if you allow it to dry out, it will become effective again. But if you live in a place where it's constantly raining or foggy or misty, then several applications throughout the season are going to be necessary. Number 4 is aspirin. Aspirin's been called the miracle drug in people for years, but it does 4 amazing things in the garden. Aspirin helps your plants become more disease resistant, produce more fruit, make the fruit taste better, and actually increases the nutrient content in the fruit it produces. Aspirin works only on plants in the nightshade family. So tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and potatoes. When nightshades are under attack by pests or disease, they produce a chemical called acetyl salicylic acid. It's a hormone that is similar to the main ingredient in aspirin. This hormone actually pumps the plant's immune system into high gear to help ward off those pests and diseases it's being attacked by. So by spraying an aspirin solution, it actually tricks the plant into bumping up its immune system when there's no pests or diseases present. So if you spray this every 2 weeks on the plant throughout the season, it's going to keep that immune system on high alert. And so if and when pests or diseases start to attack, it's already ready and it can jump into action. To make this solution, take 600 milligrams of aspirin powder and blend it with a cup of water. Then pour that solution into a gallon of water in a sprayer. You can also use aspirin tablets if you can't find the powder, but I will link to the powder down in the video description. If you do use the tablets, you want to look for an uncoated version. I'll put a link to those down in the description as well. They're a little harder to find, but the coating actually can gum up your sprayer. That's the only reason that you don't want to use that. Now keep in mind, this is not a disease cure. This is a disease and pest preventative. So it will need to be sprayed every 2 weeks, whether you have the pests or disease or not, especially before wet weather, because it's going to help protect against blight and fungal diseases that come with moisture. This is also a great time to fertilize through the foliage. You can mix in a liquid organic fertilizer. I use Neptune's Harvest tomato and veg formula. Mix it according to the directions on whatever package you get. Spray both at the same time. You're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, is aspirin considered organic? It's up in the air. I would say if you're really hardcore organic, it's probably not. However, if I had to choose between using aspirin or not getting any tomatoes, I'd choose the aspirin. Now, I have heard that you can soak willow bark in a bucket of water to pull out the acetyl salicylic acid that willow has in it. I've never done it. If you've done it, let me know down below if it worked for you. It seems plausible, and that, in fact, of course, would be organic. Now, since I revealed this secret 5 years ago, I've heard from so many of you who have used it successfully and were able to grow tomatoes in places that are wet throughout the summer, that you really had a hard time doing this before this solution. Now, if you do live in one of those areas, or even if you don't, pruning your tomatoes the right way along with this solution is going to really do a lot for your tomatoes. I'm going to put a video link right here that I'm going to show you every step how to prune your tomatoes. I'll see you guys next time.